Precisely 6 a.m., the sound of the alarm clock pierces the air. Sandy drags herself out of bed and begins her morning routine with a quick shower. After her shower, she prepares a simple breakfast. Grabbing a clean bowl from the dishwasher, she empties into it a packet of instant oatmeal. She pours in a cup of milk, stirs, and heats the mixture in the microwave. While waiting for her oatmeal to cook, she dresses for the day, mindful of the weather. Fully dressed now, she removes her oatmeal from the microwave, which has now cooled just enough to suit her taste. It is her favorite flavor, apple cinnamon. As she savors each bite, she is reminded of her mother, who always made sure Sandy ate a warm breakfast before leaving the house in the morning. Checking the time on her phone, she hurriedly swallows the last few mouthfuls of her oatmeal before heading out. As she steps into the street, a gust of wind blows back her hair. She covers her head with the hood of her coat, tightens the scarf around her neck, and braces for her walk to the train station. After settling into her seat on the train, memories of her mother stir again. She takes out her phone and texts, "Hey Mom, thanks for the scarf you knitted me. It came in real handy this morning. Love always." "Do you believe in ghosts?" Alvin asked his brother Levi one night as they were lying down in bed around 11 at night. "I don't think so," Levi replied. Alvin and Levi shared a room together. "Why not?" asked Alvin. "I have never seen one," Levi said. Alvin was 12 years old, and Levi was 18. "I think I saw one, Levi," Alvin told his brother, sounding frightened. "Go to sleep, Alvin," Levi told his brother as he turned around in his bed to face the closet. "There's no such thing as ghosts," Levi said. Alvin and Levi were lying on separate beds. Levi had fallen asleep half an hour ago, but Alvin was still awake. He was having a hard time trying to go to sleep. A sound was keeping him awake. It sounded like someone was walking out in the hallway, right outside of his bedroom door. It was completely dark. Alvin was curious to find out who was sauntering out in the hallway. 15 minutes had passed and the creaking hadn't stopped. Alvin slowly rose from his bed. He moved towards his door, taking one step every 2 seconds. He finally reached his door. He put his hand on the doorknob and gradually began to turn it. The walking had not ceased. "Alvin, what are you doing?" Levi said, right before Alvin could open the door. "I think there's a ghost in the hallway," Alvin replied. Levi rose to his feet and went to the door. "I'll go with you," Levi said. The two opened the door and popped their heads out the door to take a look. "You see, it was nothing," Levi said. Alvin and Levi went back to bed. Levi again fell asleep before Alvin. Alvin could not go to sleep. There was something walking in the hallway. Bobby loved to eat. He ate hamburgers, French fries, hot dogs, pizza, donuts, and ice cream, just to name a few. No matter how much Bobby ate, he never got a stomachache. It was no surprise that Bobby weighs 250 pounds. It might be surprising to know that Bobby is only 15 years old. Bobby didn't care that he was big. He was content with how he looked and loved eating as much as he could. Bobby liked to tell jokes to his friends. "Knock, knock," Bobby would say. "Who's there?" friends would ask. "Gorilla," Bobby replied. "Gorilla who?" they'd ask back. "Gorilla me a hamburger," Bobby replied, delivering the punchline. The joke was in how the word gorilla sounded like grill. Bobby's joke always left people in stitches. Even though Bobby was popular and friendly, he was still teased by some kids in school. Fat Boy Bobby was the nickname the mean kids gave to Bobby. Whenever Bobby heard the nickname, he would reply with the gusto, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me." The bullies would funnily reply, "I bet you would eat those sticks and stones, Fat Boy Bobby," and scurry off running. Bobby did not let idiotic name-calling bother him. He had more important things to think about, like what he was going to eat for dinner. Bobby knew that one day he would have to lose weight if he wished to live a longer life. Until that day came, Bobby would continue eating what he wanted and as much as he wanted. Jenny is a 5th grader. She is considered one of the most popular girls in her class. She is very pretty, but that is not why she is considered popular. She is popular because she is known to be among the brightest in her class. She can do the most cartwheels in a row, but mostly she has the talent to dance. Last year, she entered the school's dance competition and won the 1st place. Her whole class was there to support her. Since that day, she has been the class attraction. This year, the school is holding another dance competition, but there has been a change in this year's competition. The competition has to be done in pairs. Jenny's class was looking up to her with high expectations of her winning again this year. On the other hand, Jenny was unsure of this year's outcome. She wanted to enter the competition, but she had never danced with a partner before. She decided to ask some of the boys in her class to enter with her. They all said no to her because they did not know how to dance. Jenny was becoming hesitant about joining. She finally decided to turn to one of her closest friends, Carl. Jenny and Carl had known each other since the 1st grade. Carl was reluctant to join at first because he also didn't know how to dance. Jenny insisted. He eventually agreed to join the competition. Jenny was happy and relieved. However, she was still worried because she knew her class was counting on her to win this year's competition. All she needed was some time to practice in order to increase her chances of winning. This time, it was going to be more of a challenge considering the fact that Carl was not a good dancer. The competition was in 2 months, and only time could predict her chances of winning. After selecting Carl as her partner, Jenny needed to start planning for the dance competition at her school. The competition started in 2 months. Jenny was aware that Carl was not a great dancer. She had to dedicate some time in helping him improve his skill. On the first few days of preparation, Jenny had planned out their dance routine with the help of her teacher. They were going to be dancing to Jailhouse Rock by Elvis Presley. Jenny and Carl spent the first 2 weeks memorizing their steps and cues to their dance. Carl was pretty clumsy at first. He eventually got the hang of it. They spent the rest of the time perfecting their moves. The day of the competition was almost near. Jenny and Carl were beginning to get nervous. They were going up against 9 other pairs from the same school. The day of the competition arrived. Carl had not become a great dancer, but had definitely improved since he began. Since Jenny won last year's competition, she was to perform with Carl last. The pairs that were performing this year were better dancers compared to last year's competition. As each pair took the stage one by one, Jenny grew more anxious. Carl noticed this from Jenny and told her, "It'll be okay, Jenny. You are great, and I'm sure we'll win." Jenny felt better after hearing Carl's words. Soon it was their turn to perform. They walked on stage and began to dance as soon as their song started to play. They were off to a great start. Jenny's class was there cheering them on. The crowd began cheering them on as well. Suddenly, Jenny tripped and fell. The crowd was shocked. Carl managed to get Jenny back up on time for their big finale. Jenny was upset because of her fall. After their performance, the judges tallied up the scores and were ready to announce the winner. Jenny and Carl won, but it was a close call. If it wasn't for Jenny's talent and Carl's quick thinking to keep the routine going, they wouldn't have won. They were both awarded with a trophy and medals. Jenny and Carl were full of cheer. It is the first day of summer. George and his friend Carlos are planning on going on a camping trip. It is going to be the best camping trip, which will last 3 days. While Carlos makes invitations for their friends, George is going to make a list of activities to do while they are there. Last year, their camping trip was not entirely a success. They got a flat tire on the way to their campsite. They also had a bear take some of their food. They don't want to encounter that again. This year, they plan to go prepared. George is going to take a spare tire and gas, just in case they run out. Carlos is going to try and find a better method of storing food without attracting animals to their campsite. They don't want anything to ruin this year's trip. On this trip, George and Carlos have invited 10 of their friends. Everyone is excited. George has prepared a list of activities to do with his friends. They plan to go mountain climbing, hiking, kayaking, fishing, and to play a few games of flag football. For night activities, they plan to tell stories, sing songs along with George's guitar, and play some board games. Carlos and his friends have pitched in some money for food. With the list Carlos made, they are going to have food, vegetables, chicken, and fruit juice. The day of the camping trip is getting near. George and Carlos cannot wait. When the day comes, George and Carlos double-check to see if they have their things ready. At the last minute, George suddenly remembers that it is important to bring matches, lanterns, and flashlights. Carlos also suggests that they take binoculars for sightseeing. They are ready to go. It is going to be the best trip they have ever made. Anna woke up late one morning. She was supposed to meet up with a group of her friends that morning at 8 o'clock. She woke up at 8:15 instead. Anna rushed to get ready. She quickly showered, put on her shoes, then she grabbed her toolbox and headed out on her bike. Anna and her friends were asked to paint 2 murals for the city's library. One of the murals was to be located on the outside, and the other on the inside. The owner of the library was the one who requested these murals. The reason was because he was a fan of Anna's art, and he was planning to remodel the library. Both murals were going to be painted with a similar theme. They were both going to be paintings aimed to inspire people to read. Anna already had her ideas for both murals planned out. It was going to be colorful. Her friends were going to be there to help paint the large areas of the mural. Once Anna arrived, she noticed her friends waiting outside the library. Anna apologized for being late. She pulled out her ideas to show her friends. Her friends were impressed and excited to begin painting. They first started by outlining the images of the ideas onto both walls. Next, they mixed their colors and began to paint. Painting the mural was a lot faster to do when you have the help of your friends. They finished both murals within 2 days. The new murals attracted the attention of local visitors to the library. The owner of the library was impressed and happy with the new look of his library. He awarded Anna and her friends with recognition and paid them for their labor. Anna was pleased. 2 years ago, Amy left her small hometown in England and moved to one of the biggest cities in the United States, New York. Amy knew the transition would be difficult at first, but was confident that she would love her new life and succeed in becoming a Broadway star. She had envisioned herself getting off the airplane and immediately making new friends with whom she would spend her nights exploring the city that never sleeps. Unfortunately, the reality of Amy's situation was far from the perfect life she had imagined. Her days were spent jumping from theater to theater looking for auditions. Although she was very pretty and great at acting, her accent made it difficult for her to get hired for any roles. Directors kept telling her to work on her American accent, but the more she practiced it, the more she sounded like a cowboy rather than a New Yorker. Amy's nights were spent working at a diner in order to pay for her ridiculously expensive one-room apartment, where the sinks always leaked and the hot water never worked. To top it all off, the city that she had imagined as being filled with bright lights and friendly faces like in the movies was made up mostly of smelly alleys, big rats, and angry crowds that were always in a hurry to get somewhere. Still, Amy didn't let anything crush her spirits, and was determined to keep working hard until her dreams would come true. Finally, one day, Amy was clearing some tables in the diner while singing her favorite song as usual. "Excuse me," a man said in a nearby booth. "I couldn't help but notice that you have a beautiful voice." Amy blushed and thanked the man. "I'm actually casting for a star in my new Broadway musical of Mary Poppins," he continued. "How would you feel about acting?" Amy's heart raced with excitement just as Frank Sinatra's New York, New York began playing on the diner's jukebox. She was finally going to make it. John is a busy lawyer whose whole day revolves around two things: work and his two daughters. Balancing the two things often proves to be very difficult, so John spends most of his day in a rush to do everything he needs to do and get everywhere he needs to be. With such a hectic schedule, it is common to find John and his children in line at a McDonald's drive-thru, waiting for some burgers, fries, and shakes. "I know fast food isn't the healthiest thing I could give my daughters," admits John, "but it's the most convenient thing around when I'm in a rush. Plus, it makes them happy." Unfortunately, this attitude towards the unhealthiness of fast food is one that so many parents in the U.S. hold, and it is easy to understand why. Nowadays, nearly every single city in America is equipped with its own McDonald's. In Los Angeles alone, it can sometimes feel like there is one on every other corner when you're driving around. As if this didn't already make it hard enough for parents to avoid, McDonald's targets their famous Happy Meals to children so that every time they drive by the giant golden arches, children demand to go inside to get a new toy with their meal. Although it may be very hard for parents to have healthier meal options for their children, doing so is a necessity that this country can no longer ignore. Constantly consuming fast food is becoming a norm in American society and is resulting in millions of people suffering from obesity and diabetes for the rest of their lives. Instead of teaching children that it is okay to give in to the temptation of a quick, greasy meal, parents should get their children into the habit of healthy eating everywhere they go. In the end, children will be more thankful for living long, healthy, and happy lives than for getting a cheap toy in a cardboard box. David and Melissa had been a happily married couple for 6 years. They lived a comfortably modest life in a small apartment and had been saving up for years in preparation for the next giant step in their life, a baby. However, after repeatedly trying to get pregnant for a whole year, they consulted a doctor and received devastating news. Melissa would be unable to conceive a child for the rest of her life. The bad news struck Melissa terribly hard. Seeing his wife in such a distraught and depressed state broke David's heart. "Don't worry," he told her. "I'm going to make you the happiest woman in the planet, even if it's just the two of us." He then went to the bank, took out all their savings that had been held for the baby, and set out to do whatever he could to cheer his wife up. Since they no longer had to be careful with how much money they spent, David began splurging on everything he could think of. First, he took Melissa shopping for the finest and most beautiful clothes she could dream of. Then, they took an exotic vacation to the Florida Keys, where they spent a month exploring every island and spending thousands of dollars on the most beautiful hotels and most delicious foods they could find. When they finally returned home, Melissa said, "Oh, David, everything is perfect. I'm actually glad we don't have a child." David smiled, content with his wife's happiness, and walked over to check their voicemails from when they were away. The machine bleeped, and then their doctor's voice came on saying, "Hi guys, great news. There was a mistake in the test results. You are actually 6 weeks pregnant. It's triplets." Andrea's big day was finally here. She had been accepted into the medical school of her dreams in Boston, and was about to fly there to begin her new life. She had gotten the news of her acceptance 2 months ago, but had spent all that time so busy preparing for the move that she hadn't had time to realize how nervous she really was. It wasn't until it was time for her to get up from the plane seat that she realized her legs were shaking, her heart was racing, and her forehead was sweating. "Keep calm," she kept repeating to herself the whole way to her new apartment. She had worked so hard to get here, and she knew that she had nothing to be afraid of. Still, as she looked out of her new living room window, the world outside looked much too scary to face. Having grown up on the West Coast her whole life, she was not prepared for how everything looked here. The warm, bright sun that she was so used to seeing out this time of year was nowhere to be seen. Everyone's accents seemed completely unfamiliar, and the people even seemed taller than normal. She decided to stay in the safety of her apartment that night and didn't go outside until it was time for her class the following afternoon. As the professor asked some basic questions to see what level everyone was at, Andrea's mind went completely blank. "Oh no," she thought to herself, "I'm not even supposed to be here. Everyone knows so much more than me." Just then, the professor pointed at her and asked her a question about the functions of the spinal cord. As frightened as she was, the answer was just blurted out of her mouth instinctively. "Impressive," says the teacher. "You'll do just great here," she assured her. As the teacher walked away, one of the pesky giant ants crawled across Andrea's desk. She quickly flicked it off the edge, and then smiled confidently. Pulling into the parking lot of the largest supermarket in town, Joe could already see it was going to be a challenge to find parking on this Saturday morning. He decides to first drop off his wife Melissa, so she could get a head start on the shopping they need to do. Meanwhile, he battles to find a free spot amongst the crowd of other waiting cars. Inside, Joe finally finds Melissa, whose cart is already loaded with packages of organic snacks and drinks. He knows Melissa is easily tempted by fancy words that promise health benefits. It makes her feel good to know that she is making healthy decisions. In the past, Joe would try to reason with her, explaining that health is not about consuming specific items, and more about general lifestyle. Today, he decides to simply move on. As the chef in the family, Joe looks forward every week to the process of selecting meats and vegetables, imagining all the ways he can flavor and cook them. Free samples are being offered at the familiar locations. Melissa makes sure to hit up every station. They agree that the chicken sausage is their favorite and buy 2 packs. The buy one, get one free fresh pasta attracts Joe, while the sale on cheesecake draws Melissa. As they wait in line to check out, Melissa examines their overflowing shopping cart and realizes that they are over budget. She puts back the snacks and drinks that were clearly impulse buys, and happily claims that she is learning to be a great shopper. Joe can only smile at the expression on her face. 5 months ago, when they first got married, he never imagined he would enjoy these Saturday morning grocery trips. Now he finds them a peaceful satisfaction, a welcome change from his work all week. All week, Frank and Bob have been looking forward to Sunday afternoon. That is when their favorite football team, the Philadelphia Eagles, plays their first game of the season. The Eagles have a new coach and many new, young, and talented players. Football can be a very unpredictable game, with weather, injuries, referees, and luck all affecting the outcome of the game. On top of that, new players and coaches may need some time to learn to work as a team. For almost a decade now, Frank and Bob have watched Eagles games together. They met through work, but their friendship continues even though Frank left the company a few years back. Their wives have become close and sometimes even join them for the games. When their sons were still young, they used to be just as excited about these Sunday afternoons. Now in high school, they'd rather hang out with their friends than their fathers. Nonetheless, Frank and Bob have kept up their friendship and this tradition, and couldn't think of a better way to spend Sunday afternoons. This week, they will be watching the game at Bob's house, who is anxious to show off the new sound system he installed in his basement. As Frank walks up the driveway, carrying a pack of their favorite beer, Bob walks out to meet him, already dressed in Eagles uniform. After some playful punching, they come together for a quick embrace. Once inside, they are greeted by the familiar sounds of the pre-game show. It's going to be a great season. Julie was sitting in bed late at night playing with her brand new smartphone. Earlier that week, she had been visited by her children and grandchildren to celebrate her 70th birthday, and had received the phone as a gift from her granddaughter Mary. Julie had been widowed for 5 years now. Since she lived hours away from the rest of the family, Mary thought the phone would be a good way to keep them in touch and take up some of her time. Up until then, Julie had never really been interested in catching up with modern technology, but finally owning her own smartphone made her feel youthful, and she decided to join Facebook since that was what she had noticed all the younger people were doing. However, when making her profile page, she was embarrassed to put up a picture of herself, since she thought she looked much too wrinkly and nobody would want to talk to her. To remedy this, she downloaded a picture of a beautiful 20-something-year-old from Google, posted it under her name, and went to sleep. The next morning, Julie woke up and enthusiastically logged into Facebook in hopes that she would have 1 or 2 new friends. She could not believe her eyes. Her inbox was full of friend requests from dozens and dozens of young, handsome men that were complimenting her beauty and wanted to know all about her. Julie decided to accept only the best-looking ones and began chatting with them day and night, never letting them know that they were actually talking to a grandma. The next time Julie met up with Mary, she thanked her so much for the phone and remarked, "I haven't felt so young and pretty in years." Mary was confused and asked, "Why?" Julie just gave a mischievous smile and changed the topic. Jennifer loved going out to bowl every Tuesday night. She always liked bowling, but had never joined a bowling league until her friend Paul told her about a new league one day. The two friends enjoyed going to Lucky Lanes on weekends, but had to wait for the league games to finish before they could bowl. It did not bother them since they knew what time the league games were over. Paul talked to the manager of Lucky Lanes one day and discovered that a new league was forming soon. "That's great," said Paul. "I'm going to ask Jennifer if she wants to join too," added Paul. When Jennifer heard the news, she wasn't as excited as Paul thought she would be. "What's wrong, Jen?" asked Paul. "I just don't know if I'm good enough to play in a league," answered Jennifer. "Don't you have to be a good bowler to bowl in a league?" Paul thought about it for a while before going back to the manager to ask if the new league was for good bowlers or anyone could join. The manager told him that this new league was for beginners and added that Paul and Jennifer would be some of the best players in the new league. Paul was very excited once again. When he told Jennifer what the manager had said, Jennifer's response was, "Where do I sign up?" This made Paul very happy. Before long, the two friends were bowling away in their new team and league. The manager was right. Paul and Jennifer were amongst the best players. They both loved bowling in a league. They got to wear team bowling shirts and hats, and all the refreshments were included in the league fees. Soon they were knocking down pins. At the end of the season, their team won the trophy for coming in first place. When William worked in Santa Fe Springs, California, back in the 90s, he told me that he thought the building he worked at was haunted. "It really is," said William. "I have had more than a few incidents happen to me while I was working alone, late at night," he continued. William was working as a manager for a very busy chemical distribution company at the time. In order to keep up with his work, he sometimes had to work at night, or go in on weekends to catch up with his paperwork. William was a sensible man. He was not the type of person that would fly off the handle in troubling situations. He was always very calm and composed. This is what made his story believable. I knew he wasn't the type to make things up. One night, William went to work after dark and thought nothing of it. His former manager had told him that he might hear some weird noises coming from the warehouse, but it was only the 55-gallon drums expanding and contracting. During the heat of the day, the drums would expand, and at night, when it cooled off, the drums would contract, sometimes making a sound. William was not worried. That night, he was sitting at his desk when he heard what sounded like someone knocking on the door leading to the warehouse. William dismissed it as a drum popping and ignored it. A few moments later, the sound was back, and this time it was louder. Since there was no one else in the building, he became a bit nervous, but continued working. Soon the noises got louder and louder. The final straw was when he heard someone walking above the ceiling to his office. This scared him quite a bit, but again he ignored it. Finally, it happened again, and this time William ran into the warehouse to look above his office, but no one was there. After that, William never worked at night again. Jerry was 17 when his family decided to move out of their apartment in the city of Riverdale. They had lived there for nearly 10 years. In those 10 years, Jerry had made dozens of friends from around the city. He didn't understand why they had to move. Jerry wished he could stay behind while his family left to Arizona. He knew things weren't ever going to be the same if he left Riverdale, California. "Why do we have to move?" Jerry would ask, sounding depressed. His parents had answered that question countless times already. Despite knowing the answer, Jerry was reluctant to believe it, so he kept asking. "Why do we have to move?" Jerry asked time after time. The simple truth was that Jerry and his family could just not afford to live in Riverdale any longer. It was hard for Jerry to accept that truth. On the day before the move, Jerry walked around the familiar places in Riverdale. He walked passing the oak tree where he first kissed a girl. He walked past the corner mini-market where he would bring back milk every Sunday. He passed by his high school where he had learned and discovered his love for math and science. Jerry knocked on the doors of his friends' houses to say one final goodbye. "Goodbye, Tom," Jerry told his best friend. "Goodbye, Jane," Jerry told his girlfriend. The night fell when Jerry finally finished bidding his farewells to everyone he knew. "Goodbye, Riverdale," Jerry said, looking out of his bedroom window as he went to sleep. That night, Jerry dreamed of moving to Arizona and making friends on the first day there. Everything in Arizona seemed great in his dream. The following morning, when he awoke, Jerry no longer felt so bad about moving. "Everything is going to be all right," Jerry said to himself as he stepped into the moving van on his way to Arizona. Joel had been working at a bookstore for 4 months. Although 4 months might seem like a long time, Joel felt like it had only been 1 month since he was hired. Working at a bookstore was a dream job for Joel. He couldn't believe he got hired on the day of his interview. Joel felt grateful to be working at where he was. He loved to brag all about his job to his friends and family. Joel loved reading books on his spare time. His favorite author was Mark Twain. Joel's most beloved book of his was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Working at a bookstore not only gave Joel access to books, but allowed him to interact with other fellow bookworms. Joel often would recommend books to customers, and customers would do the same for Joel. Every now and then, he would come across a classic book and take it for himself to read. Joel's manager allowed him 1 book for free once a week. It was difficult to decide which book to take sometimes. Joel was getting paid $300 every 2 weeks. Sometimes he would surpass this amount when he worked overtime. After a couple of months, Joel had saved up enough money to finally purchase his first car. Buying a car was the main reason Joel wanted to start working. He began shopping online for used vehicles. Joel already knew what kind of car he wanted. He had first seen a picture of it in a magazine, and since then had dreamed of owning one of his very own. His dream car was a 1984 BMW. Joel wanted a black one with 2 doors. He would search on the internet until he finally found it. Joel could not believe when he discovered a seller with the car. Learning to drive seemed scary for Joel at first. He had recently purchased his first car, which was now sitting on his driveway, looking clean and shiny. The previous owner had maintained it for years and had spent a lot of money restoring it to its original condition. The car was a BMW, made in the year 1984. It was black and had only 2 doors. The interior was also black and had leather seating. The vehicle looked practically new to Joel, despite it being older than the new owner of it. Joel was eager to start driving his new car. At 21, Joel had felt the need to be driving already. He was attending college in the city of Los Angeles, working at a bookstore in the city of Montebello, and living in the city of Bell. Having a car would make traveling much more convenient. Joel had been getting around by means of public transportation. He was ready to stop taking the bus to school and work. The first thing Joel had to do was go to the DMV to register the car under his name. After that, he took a driving manual book from the DMV to study for the written test. Passing the test was the only way to get a driving permit. Joel studied for a few days and passed his test. With the permit in hand, Joel next had to find someone to teach him how to drive. Joel already knew who to ask for driving lessons. "If I'm going to teach you how to drive, you're going to have to commit 100%. Do you understand?" Joel's uncle asked him. "Yes, sir," responded Joel. After a month full of trial and error, Joel finally learned how to drive his car. Although it was scary at first, driving eventually became easy enough for Joel.